Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto, and in this video I'm gonna tell you how to choose the right memory card for your Lumix camera, and I'm also gonna be comparing SD card and XQD card and see which one is better in real life photography. The SD card is by far the most common memory card these days, and on most Lumix cameras you have no choice, you have to use SD cards. Some small cameras like the GX880 for example uses the micro SD card. But on most other Lumix cameras you have to use SD cards. But the S1 series cameras, they also can use XQD card, and if you have the latest firmware update installed, they can also take the CF Express card, which is similar to the XQD card. It's only faster than this one. The reason I'm making this video is that during the last few years, 4 years or so, I've had quite a few card failures, at least 5 card failures. I didn't lose any pictures, but I lost quite a few cards, and all those cards were SD cards. And that's quite a number of failures if you think that I started shooting digital in 1999. And during the first decade, from 1999 to 2010, I had exactly 1 card failure, very early in the digital age. It was in 2002 or something. But during the second decade, from 2010 to 2020, I've had something like 5 or 6 card failures, all SD cards. So it got me thinking, is there something fundamentally wrong with the design of the SD card? And now that I have the S1R that can also use other types of cards, XQD or CF Express cards, I wanted to compare these two cards a bit, see which one is better or handles better in real life photography and which one is faster, and is there something really wrong with the SD card, fundamentally wrong? And at first I'm gonna talk about some of the design flaws that I think exist in the design of the SD card. And then I'll make a speed test to see which one of these cards is faster, and then after that I'm gonna tell you how you can choose the best card for your Lumix camera. So let's get started. When you look at the SD card, it seems like it was never meant for really heavy-duty professional use. First of all, it has this really stupid write protection switch, which is not really actually even a switch. It's just a piece of plastic that slides in this slot. And it's way too easy to accidentally put it in the locked position, and then if you insert the card into your camera and try to shoot something, your camera of course will not shoot anything. And that's exactly what happened to me when I got my very first camera that used SD cards many years ago. And I was on a shoot, and it took me a really long time to figure out what was wrong, why the camera didn't do anything. And that camera was not smart enough to tell me if the card is write protected or not. And I learned to hate the write protection switch right from the start. And then another design flaw is especially on the UHS-2 type cards are these tiny little ribs between the contacts. I've had many cards where these ribs, these strips of plastic, become loose. First they get detached from one end, then in the end from the other end too. And these were premium brand cards, not some cheap knockoffs. And if these pieces of plastic get inside your camera and they get stuck in the memory card slot, in the very worst case scenario, you have to send your camera to be repaired because of that. And you'll be without your camera some days, maybe some weeks, and it's gonna cost you probably a lot of money because they may have to take the camera apart to get the pieces of plastic out of your camera. I have successfully removed these strips of plastic between the contacts on some cards, but I've also destroyed a couple of cards while doing that. I don't know why the cards stopped working, but just in case you want to try the same, be aware that the card may stop functioning, and don't blame it on me. Also, some cards have literally disintegrated on me. They've split in two, revealing all the microchips inside, and of course that kind of card is useless also. About a year and a half ago, Sony launched their Tough Series SD cards, and those cards pretty much rectified all these problems. Those Sony cards don't have the right protection switch, and they also got rid of these rips between the contacts. Before I talk about the XQD card, please remember to sign up for my monthly newsletter. There's a link in the description, but you can also go directly to my website, sulanto.fi, to subscribe. Thanks. And here's the XQD card. And I'd like to thank Focus Nordic here in Finland for providing me with this card so I can make this video. When you look at this card, it feels right away a lot more robust than the SD card. The design is very clean. There are no unnecessary parts on this card. And for some people, the little bit bigger size may also feel more comfortable to handle. I don't mind. I think the SD card is also not too small to handle comfortably, but I'm sure some people will feel more comfortable handling this little bit bigger size card. But I also think that the little bit bigger size means that the XQD card and also the CF Express card, which has exactly the same design, will never end up in one of the smaller cameras, like maybe many of the Micro Four Thirds cameras, because of the size. It's just too big. The contacts of this card are well hidden and protected in the slot at the other end of the card. But I can see a small problem here too. If I'm, for example, outside shooting something and I happen to drop the card and some dirt gets into this slot, it can be hard to clean, or even worse, if I don't realize there's some dirt in the slot where the contacts are and I shove it into my camera, I can potentially damage something. But other than that, I can see very little that can go wrong with this card. As always, I'd like to hear about your experiences. Have you ever had a card failure? Have you lost your photos because of that? And what kind of other experiences you have with memory cards? And have you used, other than SD cards, maybe XQD cards or other types of cards? Please leave me a comment down below and let me know. One of the advantages of the XQD card over the SD card is that the XQD cards are faster. For me personally, it's not usually a problem because I don't use continuous shooting very often. But if you shoot a lot of sports, wildlife, or something where you are using the continuous shooting and you're filling up the buffer of your camera, it's important to have a fast card that clears the buffer as quickly as possible. So I decided to see how much faster the XQD card really is. I used my Lumix S1R to measure the speed. I shot RAW plus fine JPEG until the buffer was full. Then I timed how long it took to clear the buffer. The XQD card is rated at 400 megabytes per second, and I used 3 different SD cards, and these cards are rated between 250 and 300 megabytes per second. All the SD cards performed identically. I got 42 photos in the buffer before it was full, and it took about 21 seconds to clear the buffer. And with the XQD card, I got 43 pictures in the buffer, and it took 15 seconds to clear the buffer. So I got, with the XQD card, I got 1 extra picture in the buffer before it was full, and it was also a lot faster. It would be very interesting also to have the CF Express card here and to test that. Those cards can reach up to 1400 megabytes per second, so many times faster than this. And it would be interesting to see if the camera can actually take advantage of such a fast card. So what do I think now that I've had a chance to use also this XQD card? Is this card design superior to the SD card? Well, I'm not sure if it's superior, but I think the XQD/CF Express card is a lot better design, and I think these cards are probably a lot more reliable than SD cards. But these are also a lot more expensive, and not so many cameras use these cards, at least right now. But let's finally find out the way to choose the best card for your Lumix camera. First of all, it makes sense to choose a card that is compatible with all your camera's features. And usually the most demanding feature is the 4K video. All new Lumix cameras can record 4K video at the rate of 100 megabits per second. And if the camera is capable of 50 or 60p 4K, then the data rate is 150 megabits per second. So you want to have a card that has a V30 or UHS-3 rating. That means that the card can sustain 30 megabytes per second write speed, which means 240 megabits per second. And that should be enough for almost all Lumix cameras. But there are some cameras like the GH5 and 5S that can record up to 400 megabits per second. And for those cameras, if you want to take advantage of that high megabit rate, video rate, you need a card that has minimum of V60 speed rating. And if your camera has 2 card slots, buy 2 similar cards. And then there's one more thing that especially video shooters should pay attention to. There are 2 types of SD cards, SDHC and SDXC cards. And those SDHC cards are typically up to 32 gigabytes. And those cards use FAT32 file system, which is limited to 4 gigabyte files. And if you're shooting a little bit longer 4K video, the video will record okay, but on the card it will be split into 4 gigabyte bits, which is not very practical. But the SDXC cards are typically 64 gigabytes and bigger, and those cards use exFAT file system, which is limited to 2 terabytes. On those cards, even if you shoot a longer video, the video will be just one file, no matter how big it is, because you're not gonna shoot 2 terabytes of video at one take. But if you're a photographer, it doesn't matter, because no single photo file is gonna be 4 gigabytes. So for most Lumix cameras, you wanna have a card that has at least V30 or UHS3 speed rating. But if you have the GH5, 5S or the S1H, then you want to have a card that has at least a V60 speed rating. And as always, it's not a bad idea to take a look at the manual before you go out and buy any cards. All the recommendations are listed also in the manual. I hope you enjoyed this little video of memory cards. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next time. And one more thing, from now on we're back in our normal schedule again, 2 videos per week. So the next video will be up on next Tuesday. So thanks one more time, and I'll see you in the next one.